I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is all the mods 10 to the sky. Jumping back into some more all the mods 10 to the sky, and today we're going to be getting a little bit dirty with mechanism. Yes. Now I know hearing the word mechanism might scare a few people. We've dabbled a little bit in mechanism automation, but we haven't really touched any of the advanced power generation parts of mechanism in this series. And I will say that it is pretty powerful to get up early game, but I will say it's also kind of complicated, requires a lot of machinery, a lot of moving parts, and there are some things you need set up before you can even start working on this stuff efficiently. And one of the things that you need set up is going to be alloy automation. So if you missed that episode, be sure to go back and check it out. We are using advanced pattern providers to send into this infusion factory. And for the setups that we're going to be doing today, we don't need anything crazy like this. I mean, this right here is about as good as we're going to need for generating just about anything we're going to need moving forward. And so, yes, we have our crushing factory automated, enriching factory automated, and also the compressing factory all being combined together to give us all of the alloys and in a really nice and complex, compact setup. Now, on top of all of that, we also need space. And you're like, well, Chosen, like, of course. Yeah, well, of course we need more space. What do we need the space for? Well, to be able to produce antimatter, which is required for the star, yes, we are going to need a fission reactor. We're also going to need all of the components that lead up to a fission reactor. And that is where space is heavily needed. And so I've started working on adding some space to the base, as we've pretty much filled the entire thing up from top to bottom. So I've now started to branch off of here, and I want to add some chutes for decoration in this build to give it some supports, because this is going to be a structure that is sort of hanging off the edge. And you can't tell me that doesn't look good. I'm also lining it with metal girders. That should give us plenty of space, and it will kind of make it look like this thing is being suspended, like it was in a door that had opened up to fold this open here. But yes, if you didn't know this about create chutes, they can basically, if you place them on the side of one another, they do create a chute that allows an item to drop down through the side and end up down here. It's pretty neat little thing. But yes, also really good for decoration. Like, you cannot like forget about create for the decorative purposes. It's really good, especially girders. Now, after a little bit of work here, I think this looks pretty darn good. I thickened it up to make it look a little bit nicer out here to fit everything else. All these girders definitely helped with that process. And something like this, for example, I could place that down, make it look a little bit even. I made sure to branch this off so that way it fit in, and I thickened these walls and made them 3 thick, and then use some girders down here to make it kind of look like there's a seal. I don't know, that's kind of what I was going with. But here we have another portal. I linked them up so that way they lead back out to here using the mechanism portal system, which I find to be really fast and kind of cool. But I want to be able to get it to look like this. So to do this, this is where the camel blocks come into play again. Yes, the camel blocks. These are pretty darn cool. The fact that they can even cover blocks like such. And we could just simply shift right click and cover all of these. And then whenever we take off, look at that. It's so seamless. Like, that looks so good with this whole area. This is perfect. I'm even going to technically make this point look like that. Then I'll just connect these in. Oh, beautiful. With our teleporter in, it's time to get down and dirty with mechanism. And that means we need to first start by setting up a few different things. Now, today we are going to be producing fissile fuel, but we also need to produce HDPE pellets. These are going to be required, like I said, for that all the mod star, and ultimately for the generation of things we're going to need in the future. For example, antimatter. Now, you know what? Since we're diving deeper into mechanism, what's your favorite machine from the mechanism mod? I would love to hear from you down in the comments below. And so let's get back to it. Now, in my opinion, some of the first things that we should get set up are electrolytic separators. So I have some electrolytic separators that is set up over here, and we need to feed these some water to produce hydrogen and oxygen, which are important for this mod. And we are going to store that hydrogen and oxygen inside of quantum entangle porters. Now, don't let that name scare you. Quantum entangle porters are very, very simple in what they are. They can essentially hold items. If we go to config, they can hold fluids, chemicals, energy. They can also hold apparently heat. They can hold items, and they can send all of that into another quantum entangle porter. And they kind of work just like the teleporter that we used. So you set a channel and you name it, and inside of that single channel, you have access to all of those different types. And I like to define a channel, because you can use infinite channels. I like to define a channel per material. And it makes it really nice to be able to transfer materials from machine to machine, because these can accept items they can be transferred into, because they do have an internal buffer, and they can also auto eject. And I think that's what makes them really powerful in cases like this. We want to use them to automatically eject things. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to know what they are linked to unless you look inside the machine. But we may be able to visualize that here with some item frames or something like that. I do think setting up some visuals is going to be very helpful for us moving forward. Now, just in case you're following along and you're wondering how I'm setting up the underground section here, I am placing in some applied energetic cables because I want to use this to feed like water, for example, into these. Now, I'm also going to feed the water into a quantum entangle porter. We're going to use that later on down the road. That's going to save us on channels. But for right now, what we can do is we can feed these machines with some water. So make sure we pull this out. I think that's going to be more than enough right here. And we just got to get an exporter onto this and feed this some water from the back. Now, the problem with mechanism machines, unlike many other types of machines, is they can't automatically pull into the machine. You need some sort of external factor thing to send the products and stuff like that into the machine. But like I said, they can eject into another machine. So it's usually always from the start that you have to send some sort of product in. For example, water in this case, we just want to make sure to get that in, and also give some acceleration cards to make sure we can flood this with water. But by default, this is automatically going to jumpstart. You can see while we had some residual power, it has produced some hydrogen and some oxygen, which we then want to store inside of some quantum entangle porters. And this is going to be our first example of seeing how these work. Now, usually figuring out which side things are going to be sent from can be kind of tedious, but as you can see, we have some hydrogen that is going into the left side. So we know that it auto exports hydrogen to the left, and so that means oxygen should get auto exported to the right. And so if we build an entangle porter for this, we should get hydrogen over here, and we should get oxygen over here. But we do have to define these first, I believe, before they start accepting things. So we can type in hydrogen, for example, accept this, and you can see hydrogen is now automatically going in because the default config inside of here allows the input of just about anything. But what it doesn't allow is the export of anything. Every time we go to export something, we have to make sure we trigger that on and set that export. And so here we go. We have oxygen, and then we create this channel, and we should be ready to go. Yes, oxygen up and running. And we can see the oxygen automatically being stored inside the quantum entangle porter. And the cool thing is we can just place one down now that we have it defined, and we can say hydrogen and set it. And then on this side, we can say oxygen and set it. Give this some power with a gate, for example. And now this is also going to be draining and also filling this up. And I do want to have two, just because I know that we end up using a lot of oxygen and a lot of hydrogen in our setups. And if we ever need to add more, the bonus with this is we can stack vertically. That's right, because with the entangle porters, we can copy the settings from a existing entangle porter and just simply paste it to the top. And this is where we can use entangle porters to make modular setups. Yes, I love the word modular, and I also love the way that they function. And so, yes, it's fully expandable if you ever need to make more. So now when taking a look at HDPE sheets and technically making the HDPE pellets, we need to make substrate. So to be able to generate substrate, we need to send some biofuel from Mechanism, which is just simply some products crushed down in a crusher from Mechanism. And we need to send that in with some hydrogen that we're currently producing, some water, and we should be able to create this substrate. Now, a problem that we may encounter with our current setup here is what happens if this, for example, hydrogen fills up, or let's say this oxygen fills up. Well, the whole machine's going to stop. So we want to make sure that we dump excess so that way it constantly stays generating for both sides. So we are going to be utilizing our hydrogen. And I think that means over here, our first machine is probably going to need to be the crusher to kind of get us started. We need to crush down a few things from within Mechanism. So we can easily make a basic crusher for this. And let's get that up and running, right? Crusher, just like so. Perfect. Place this down. Now, what do I want to send into this crusher? Now, this is very, very simple. I am going to just send from the back some bread. So we need an exporter, and we are going to export bread into the crusher, which is then we're going to have that item sent into the next machine. Now in this pack, the reason I am using bread is not because it's the best, but it's because I do have wheat automated. And we have 22,000 wheat that's just passively being generated. Now, in my opinion, the hardest part about setting up any machine from Mechanism is just dealing with the configs, but you can actually hold down Shift and click this button. And it's going to clear all the configs. And now we can actually move this around and we can define our inputs and outputs ourselves. So, for example, we can see that that's our exporter. We want that to be an input, and we want this to automatically be able to accept the items that are coming into the back, which should be bread. And so you can see bread just ended up making it into here, and we don't have any power, so I'm just going to use a regular gate on the front. But because I cleared this, we want to make sure that our energy has a place to go, and we want that to be accepted on the front. But we can make all sides accept energy. I think by default, it doesn't clear it on the first time, but if you click clear twice, it does clear all of the energy inputs. But there we go. So now we're generating this, but we've got to configure the blue side. And where do we want this to sit our products? Well, now, according to this, we want to send that to make substrate, and this is going to produce a byproduct. It's our first major byproduct. We get a substrate and the byproduct, but we also need to send hydrogen and water to this together. Now, most of the machines work from left to right, so this is something to kind of keep in mind. But I mean, any sort of logistical pipe is going to work for us to be able to send the output. So we can make some logistical transporters, place that in here. Inside of our machine, we just need to define this as our output location and then turn auto eject on. We don't even have to configure the pipe. It's going to automatically send it over here. And most of the sides are set up for input. What we do have to worry about, though, is our output and our byproduct output, because these are pretty important. And I think for this machine, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to output the ethylene that we're going to be generating, which I believe, by the way, based on this, right, is a gas. So I want to take this ethylene and it needs to get converted into a liquid ethylene, right? So yes, anything that I think has a burn rate, like you can see right here, is going to be a gas. So that means underneath our settings, we can go under chemicals, and this I want to output to the top, not output to the right. We don't have to configure all of the sides for everything or dump all of the sides. A lot of these machines are going to be set up by default. And so I want the liquid ethylene to be output to the top, and this is where I'm going to use a chemical tank. And I think a chemical tank is going to work really, really well for this, because we can also just pipe out of here or dump access as needed, because it does have an option for that. Also, I need to make sure I put it on the right container, right? We want this to be where we're sending our product. Now, this thing is going to be covered in all kinds of gadgets and gizmos, because it also is going to need water and hydrogen. Now, if we did connect this up to our AE system, we could simplify things a little bit, but I do want to kind of not use AE besides the sending of items. So I don't want to actually use applied mechanistics, which is in the pack, by the way. And we could get away with connecting up to this and using like storage buses to read the contents and send this over. It's just something we could do. By the way, let's go ahead and mute this machine, and might as well mute this one as well. We'll do all of the upgrades later, but I do want to keep the muting happening. So let's continue this on, right? We need to get water and hydrogen onto here. So we can take our quantum entangle porter, and we could have one set up for water, which I think would be a good idea. But I'm just going to, I think, continue sending water via this method right here, where we branch up, and just underneath here, we use an exporter and so on and so forth, right, to send water. Now, water is going in. Perfect. Now we've got to handle the hydrogen, and this is where things just continue on. I'm going to place down this on the bottom of the machine, and I'm going to say, and select hydrogen. And then inside of the config, this is where we need to configure, because the only default output is going to be the front, which is this side right here. And if you really want to see what side is which, I do recommend that you make yourself a configurator from Mechanism, and it'll allow you to see what side's what, which is, it'll kind of give you a visual. If you like to see things more visually, you can see this is the blue output side, but down here, this is an input side. So it kind of allows you to visualize that a little bit easier. But I honestly don't mind the GUI here, and I am going to go into this, and we are going to say output to the top automatically. And we shouldn't have to worry about anything else. I believe we just have to make sure that the machine here can accept this from the bottom. So hydrogen is a chemical, I believe, so we should be able to see the input into here. Come on now, I think. Unless I set this wrong, which I definitely did. I don't even see it in the configs. Oh, I did items. That's not what I want. Okay. So yes, make sure you click the right tab when setting it, and then make sure auto input is on. There we go. And now we're producing the things we need. Now, none of this that we are working on is dangerous. We don't have to worry about anything exploding or anything damaging our base. Fissile fuel and also making the plastic is not something you should worry about. However, when we go to make reactors, that is a little bit more concerning, but nothing we're working on today. Now, here we go. I mean, everything is sending. We now are producing ethylene in here, which could be used as a fuel source. However, I believe in this pack, it's been sort of reduced. You used to be able to get about 70,000 Fe. I believe that's the base out of ethylene with a gas burning generator. It's not really the case anymore in most packs because everybody kind of nerfs it, even though I'm not the biggest fan of that nerf. But here we go. So we have ethylene that's being produced, but we need to convert that into liquid ethylene. So that's going to be sent into a rotary condensator. And I do want to place it like this because we're also going to be using a logistical pipe to send the items over here. Now, we don't want any item config for this. So let's go underneath the item tab. We're not going to be sending any items anywhere. By the way, you can hold shift to completely clear that. And you can see that down here, we no longer have any items that are being sent anywhere. This is perfect. Now, we're not going to use ethylene anywhere else. So what I want to do is take our chemical here and I want to auto output that directly into this. And that's going to produce that liquid ethylene. And now this is considered a liquid. And you can see our output right here, default output and auto eject is automatically on. Now we want to make sure our substrate has auto output on for our items, which it is. And so now we're basically ready to move on to making the actual HDPE pellet. And then we've just got to give this oxygen. So another PRC or pressurized reaction chamber. And we just need to place that down right here. You can see the item has now gone in. And then we need to take this liquid ethylene, give this some power so that way it starts producing and doing all that stuff. Mute these machines. And then we need to send this over, which is just going to be through a pipe. So yes, regular mechanical pipe should be enough. And that auto output should send directly to here. And now we've just got to grab a quantum entangle porter. And if I do this correctly and I place it like so, this, once we select oxygen, is automatically set up to start sending oxygen in here so long as we go into the chemicals tab and we hit auto eject. And there we go. So now this machine right here, as soon as we give it some power, is producing the HDPE pellets. Beautiful. And to be able to get HDPE sheets, we can take 3 of those pellets and we can use that to produce a sheet in an enrichment chamber, in which I'm probably just going to put over here somewhere. Now, converting them automatically is something you probably want to do, but base HDPE pellets can be used to make HDPE rods, which you can use to make the pipes wrench. I really don't know, the plastic, or you can use it to make a pigment mixer, but notice this is the only real recipes for that. So we can just take what we get generated as of right now, and I'm just going to make those just in case I ever want to make the pigment generator. Doubt it, as we do have like unlimited dyes. And yeah, everything is going to get converted automatically. And all I need to do is set up a logistical pipe here. Just make sure that underneath this auto output is on. That should automatically send that into this machine, which will produce it. And then up here, what I'm going to do is set this to the output up top. And that will automatically push into a drawer. And then we can contain our HDPE sheets inside of here. Just give this some power. And this bad boy is ready to rock and roll. We're going to have sheets just like that. So the only other thing that I want to mention about the HDPE sheet part is the fact that you want to put this into dumping excess. And that is because eventually this will build up, and then this will cause the chemical tank to build up. And once the chemical tank builds up, this will stop functioning, meaning that you will no longer be producing the substrate. And you do need substrate to constantly keep this going. And so what we'll end up doing is just simply voiding off any of the excess ethylene that gets generated in the process. And so this should continuously run, and we can upgrade these machines to make it faster and faster and faster and what have you. But yes, we are producing HDPE sheets, which I promise you is 100% necessary, as these are required in making any of the upgrades. And well, you also need it for SPS casings, which we need for antimatter. So with this setup upgraded to max upgrades, you can see inside of here with our speed modifications, these pipes are easily able to keep up with everything that is flowing through here. And you just end up with this nice constant chain of items, which I really love seeing. So now we need to move into fissile fuel and produce this stuff so that way we can use it inside of a reactor to generate some waste. But the process of generating fissile fuel can be kind of confusing, but if we break it down into 3 parts, just like this, which I love to use this setup as an example, we can start to understand this a whole lot better. So we will essentially have 2 different processing lines, one that is processing sulfur, one that's processing uranium, and then we have a combining line, which is ultimately going to produce the fissile fuel. And our first line is pretty darn simple. We have sulfur that we feed into a chemical oxidizer, and then that will produce this product over here, sulfur dioxide. That then gets combined with some chemicals that we're already producing in a chemical infuser, and then that will produce sulfur trioxide. Then we take the sulfur trioxide, send that and combine it with some other chemicals that we're already producing into another chemical infuser, and that essentially produces sulfuric acid. And then we also need steam, which we will kind of put this to the side in the rotary condenser. We'll just simply convert water into steam, which is going to be needed inside to produce sulfuric acid. This one's kind of just put to the side because it is needed for this operation. And then we take a look at uranium, and uranium is probably the simplest of the group. We just need to take regular uranium ingots, turn it into yellow cake uranium in an enrichment chamber, and then we send that to a chemical oxidizer that then produces uranium oxide. Pretty straightforward whenever you think of it as that. Once we have those things done, we need to then take the sulfuric acid and we combine that with some fluoride inside of a chemical dissolution chamber, and I believe, or actually a chemical infuser in this case, and that is going to produce our hydrofluoric acid. No, it is a chemical dissolution chamber. So yes, we'll take sulfuric acid, combine it with fluoride, and we get hydrofluoric acid. This is the final step in producing, where you just combine these two. And then on the chemical infuser, there's where we take that new hydrofluoric acid and we combine it with the uranium, uranium oxide. And this just gets combined up and we get uranium hexafluoride. And then we send that uranium hexafluoride into an isotropic centrifuge to produce, yes, simply fissile fuel. So in the idea of this, it is broken down into 3 individual parts, and it makes it so much easier to visualize, and just taking a screenshot of this and saving it will help you in the future if you ever set this up again. Now, what I'm going to do with this information is I'm going to take it and I'm going to show you a modular setup so that way you can infinitely scale this. You can keep making more and more and more and more of it if you need to by utilizing these quantum entangle porters. Now, first things first, I'm going to do the enrichment and oxidizer, and I'm actually going to set up all of the machines over here just by simply placing them down. So this right here is where I am going to handle the uranium. And then over here, we can start this new set. And if I just remove things from my inventory, I know it's an absolute mess, we can go ahead and set up all of these machines. Just like so. Infuser, and then over here, we'll have the rotary condensator, which I might move over here. Just really depends. We want to make sure that we can just send steam, which will be generated probably in this corner, back into this machine, and then we'll ultimately have our product that gets produced. Now on this side, this is where we are going to complete the process and our fissile fuel will ultimately be made. So we'll start over here with the dissolution chamber, the chemical infuser, and then our centrifuge. So now for a little bit of explanation here, let's start with the easier one. We just want to make uranium oxide. This is very, very simple. We send uranium into the back of the enrichment chamber, making sure the inputs are set up so that way it accepts it, and then auto outputs through a logistical pipe. We'll use this to transport the items into the setup, because thankfully pipes can still scale, and we don't actually need to configure anything for this. Now, the oxidizer over here, this is a little bit different because we do want to make sure that items can be input, but we're also now producing a chemical. So we are producing a chemical, which is going to be the uranium oxide, and that needs to be auto output onto the side, which it should auto output by default. Most of the side auto outputs happen on the right-hand side of the machine after you've placed it down like so. And so if I just place this down, we can go ahead and open this up. And this is actually where I want to put the name uranium oxide in here and then define it. That way we can use this later on. So with uranium oxide defined, we should be good to go. So we just got to give this some power, turn it on, and just really let this thing rip. Now, something that we'll come back to later is the fact that this setup is actually a bottleneck. Even with it fully upgraded, this will become a bottleneck. And that's because we probably will need to stack at least 3 of them to be able to even get close to maxing out an isotropic centrifuge. And I actually think it's closer to 6 stacked machines in order to do that. But perfect. We have uranium oxide now built up inside the quantum entangleporter. Now moving on to the next line, this is where we're going to be producing sulfuric acid. So I have my sulfur that is now inputting into the chemical oxidizer. And I think it might be best if we take all of these and we just give them a little bit of power. Now I may have to upgrade these gates later on to be able to accept the amount of power, because these things will end up using a significant amount of power, by the way, like given once they're all upgraded, that is. So there we go. This now has some power. It's going to produce sulfuric dioxide. Now I only want to use the entangleporters for the finished product, so that way we can send that over to the line down here. So most of these things can be chained, and we can just simply use a pressurized tube. So this will be able to send automatically into here, and you can see the sulfur dioxide that is built up. Now on the back of this machine, this is where I want to combine oxygen with it. And that's, again, where our entangleporter is going to come into play. And we just need to select oxygen, set, and then we've got to go underneath our chemical tab and set auto eject to on. And we might have to configure which side receives this product. So I think by default, the chemical infusers are a little bit odd, where they don't automatically want to accept things from the back. So in this case, we'll go underneath the chemicals tab, and then input 2 is actually going to be set up right here. So we need input 2 just like this. And you can see sulfur trioxide is getting made. And then we want sulfur trioxide to be our output, not outputting from the front, which we don't have to worry about changing that config, but we do want the output to the right, because we're going to take this yet again, and we're going to send this onto here. And before we set anything up, moving into the next part, we can do the exact same config. This is going to be accepting water vapor, and we're going to generate water vapor from this condensator right here, which I'm already technically doing. If we take a look down in the bottom, I'm just sending water with an exporter into the bottom, and then I've clicked this button to change it to decondensating mode, which then is producing water vapor, in which I want the output for the water vapor, which by the way is a chemical. We want this to actually send to the top as an output. That is going to actually be sent into a new quantum entangleporter, in which I'll just create a new channel for water vapor, and it's already defined whenever you do create the channel. And then we'll go underneath the chemical tab and make sure the input is set. And there we go. Water vapor is already building up, and we can use that on this infuser. Back to this chemical config, we'll make sure to set the right as an output, and then over here we will set this as input 2 on the back, meaning we can just use a quantum to go ahead and select water vapor, set that, and then on our chemical config, on the output face, we just simply need to toggle it on, and we're good to go. And now to finish up the sulfuric acid line, well, we need to make a sulfuric acid quantum entangleporter. And we'll go ahead and accept that. And I'm just going to use a pressurized tube to automatically send that into this container. And that right there is sulfuric acid automated. So now to wrap everything together, we'll start with our dissolution chamber. This is going to require some fluorite, and we need to send that sulfuric acid to it to be able to make the hydrofluoric acid. That will then also just get sent to this infuser over here. But we do need to get the product into it. So what I'm going to do is go to our chemicals tab, because that's what we're dealing with, and make sure the inputs are set up correctly. And we can actually just slap this directly onto the top. but we do need to make sure that we are sending the correct thing to here. So hydrofluoric acid is going to be the sulfuric acid one that we just created. We'll go underneath the chemical tab and make sure output is set to the bottom and then auto send to it. Once that is done, and we take a look at our setup over here, this should start now sending to here, so long as we made sure that our items can be sent from the back, which we can do right there. So beautiful. Now we are producing the thing. Let's check our output side on the chemical, which it is automatically outputting, which will send into this machine now, which is beautiful. Now we can just use another pressurized tube and we are able to send that into the chemical infuser. Now, something I do want to mention though about this machine is utilizing the upgrades. There is actually a chemical upgrade that you can put in here to make sure it doesn't use as much of the chemical every time it does an operation. So make sure you do put this in here. It is going to make it a bit more efficient and not use as much of that sulfuric acid to do this operation. Then we move on to the chemical infuser. So this is going to be the uranium hexafluoride production, which means we are going to take that uranium we just produced and we need to send it to here. So I'm going to actually change my input to and make sure that is set up over here. And then we just want the right-hand side to be our main output. Everything else can be set the same. The reason we want the input to on the back is so that way I can use this to simply send to the back of the machine by default. So yes, we are looking for uranium. So we'll just take this and uranium oxide. We'll go ahead and set uranium and then make sure that underneath the chemical tab, we auto send, and voila, we now have the two chemicals being combined up. And then we just need to yet again send this over into the isotropic centrifuge, which by default should be set up exactly the way we want it to be set up. However, I do want to automatically send the fissile fuel to the back of the machine. I think that is going to make it look nice and clean. I could place it right here, but I think the back is going to look really good. So in the back under the chemical tab, we'll make sure the back is set to the output and automatically have that turned on. And this is where we will do fissile fuel. So I'm going to rotate this backwards and making sure the input is set up. And we'll just call this fissile fuel because we are now done essentially. So the only thing left to do now that fissile fuel is starting to be produced is to sit back and start upgrading these machines and figuring out where our bottleneck resides to be able to maximize this. Already I can tell you, making sure that we have higher tier gates on here is probably going to be a good idea. I think going up to nitro would probably be the best idea just to make sure everything's good. And then figuring out where our bottlenecks are here. So I know that we're going to need to upgrade this. We want these to be constantly producing, and we'll be able to figure that out by letting this run once we get all of these upgrades in here. So now I've got all of this upgraded, and we can definitely see that we are very, very low on the uranium. And that's where I was saying before that this I already knew needs to be kind of scaled up. We need to make sure that the enrichment chamber can produce more. And we also need to make sure we have more chemical oxidizers. So this is where we can just simply copy settings of the machine. So I'll stack this machine just like this. We also want to make sure to get some power to it, just like so. And then what we can do is use a configuration card and shift right click to copy, right click to paste these settings. And something else that we should also do is grab some entangle porters. And this is why on the output side, the entangle porters are pretty important. Because we can just simply scale up and copy the settings. So we'll place the entangle porters right here. We could also pipe directly down into this, but I just wanted to show you, you can also copy the settings of the entangle porters and it's going to automatically pull in the correct thing. And now all we've got to do is extend the pipe up and we're good to go. Also, probably want to upgrade these pipes. And we can do that by simply right clicking with the alloy. And look at that. Now, right here is where I have to kind of rat on the mechanism pipes a little bit because this is only sending to the bottom chemical oxidizer. It is not pulling any more to be able to route out here. And it is because this machine does push. But I think if we set this to pull, that will then start to fill all of these. So now we're like forcing it to also pull. It's still, though, not reaching all the way up here. And so I'm sorry, mechanism pipes, but I am going to remove you because I think even using the regular pipes mod and honestly setting this to pull and just using a regular diamond tier upgrade, not even going super crazy with it with a max tier, I think keeps up. Like it's just, I think it's just honestly the distribution here, setting it to round robin to make sure all of them are equally distributed is another great part of using the pipes mod. It's such a small inventory here that it's pulling from. Yeah, it should get the job done. But is this actually keeping up? Sort of. So what we want to really look at here is our dips in our fissile fuel production. It does seem like this is kind of keeping up for the most part. And I think possibly one more, it probably would be keeping up. But yes, right here, we're producing about 256 millibuckets. I believe that is the max that the isotropic centrifuge can generate based off of this, which in my opinion is more than enough for us to get started and to be able to do all the things we want to do with our fusion reactor or fission reactor, which we're about to be getting up and running. And so there you have it, fissile fuel production automated and looking pretty good, if I do say so myself. That is a lot of fissile fuel that has already started to build up here, and we are producing it at a very efficient rate. All of these machines are now running at maximum, and like I said, it is scalable, but I don't think we're gonna have to worry about needing more than we're currently producing. That's because even running at a burn rate of about 100 millibuckets per tick is quite a lot for a fission reactor. And is going to be hard enough in itself to maintain and keep up with, but we should be able to push this whole setup pretty hard, especially if we only use water cooled for this setup. So you know what, after all of this, I think it's definitely worth a good old sip of coffee. Feeling so much more energized after that. I mean, there's just a few final things that need to be done. I'm just gonna camo this. It actually makes like covering up AE cables so much easier than actually using the cable covers. Gotta love this. It's so much nicer. Now, there is one more thing that I would kind of like to get set up, and that is a way to be able to see our actual production rate. And I think we can do this with advanced AE, and I kind of want to have a screen that is directly on top of this, and we can do that with a throughput monitor. At least we should be able to do that with a throughput monitor. Now, as of right now, there is nothing on here, but we can give this some power, for example, by slapping this on the back. That should make the device online. And then right in here is our fissile fuel we're detecting with a storage bus. So how do we actually display the liquid on here? I think we just need to fill a bucket with this fluid. And what is a good way to grab some fissile fuel out of a container? I don't think we can just simply right click on here, but we can automatically output from here. So the default side should be ready to go and auto output. So we auto eject, and this should be the face. That's right. I completely forgot. Yes, this is a chemical, so it actually can only go in a chemical tank, but there we go. Now we have the chemical tank, and we should be able to click this on the screen. How do we display a chemical through the throughput monitor? We just have to click it again. And once we click it again, then it does switch over. But for some reason, it's not actually reading the chemical that is inside here. Interesting. There we go. So inside of the quantum entangle porter, I just had to set the chemical side to output. And now the storage bus is able to read, and we are able to kind of see, plus or minus, right? Like give or take, we're able to see the amount of fissile fuel slowly building up in here and how much we're actually generating per tick. Interesting. I gotta love advanced AE for something like this, like being able to monitor throughputs of certain things, power included. Very, very neat little thing that you can do with just a little subnet. And so there we go. Look at that. It is completely filled already. Oh man, we have our 8,000 buckets of fissile fuel now completely stored. Looking pretty good, which is going to allow us to move on to our next steps. And so we have our HDPE sheet processing. We have all of the fissile fuel processing that is happening. And then over here, we are going to be handling our reactor, which is going to eventually be able to produce antimatter, and our SPS. And then we've just got to worry about power. Yes, the power to send to the SPS. So that way we can make sure that we are generating enough antimatter and being able to process all of our waste. That's gonna have to wait till another episode. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope you learned something new about these more advanced topics related to mechanism. If you did, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give this video, guys, a huge thumbs up. I really do appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Without further ado, it's now time for me to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that huge thanks is going to go out to Coach Punchable Face. I couldn't even fit it all in one line. It's so long. Thank you so much for your amazing support and choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and supporting my content in one of the best ways possible. You absolute boss. Appreciate you very, very much. And guys, I thank you as well. I'll see you in the next one. And as always, thanks for watching.